We all know how the story ends, or at least we think we do. After unimaginable suffering, after carrying the greatest burden in the history of his world, Frodo Baggins is granted a grace that no mortal has ever received. He's given passage to the Undying Lands, to Valinor. It's the ultimate reward, the happily ever after. He sails into the west with Gandalf and Bilbo, leaving the sorrows of Middle-earth behind for a land of eternal peace. And for most of us, that's where we close the book. We see the ship disappear over the horizon, and we feel a sense of profound, earned relief. He made it. The hero got his rest. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Here is the gap in that perfect, clean ending. J.R.R. Tolkien told us exactly what the Undying Lands were. He described the light, the air, the very soil of that place. And he was very, very clear on one critical point. Valinor does not grant immortality to mortals. In fact, for a mortal, its undying quality could be unbearable, like a moth trying to live in the heart of a flame. It could burn them out, faster. So what we're about to uncover isn't just a postscript to a beloved story. It's a complete reframing of what Frodo's reward actually was. It changes everything about that final, bittersweet scene. It forces us to ask a much more difficult and much more human question. When a hero is broken by his quest, what does healing actually look like? Is it a return to who you were, or is it something else entirely? Let's imagine that first day. After the long grey wash of the sundering seas, the ship passes through the straight way, the path hidden from mortal eyes. The first thing Frodo would have noticed isn't a sight, but a feeling. The air itself is different. In Middle-earth, even on the most beautiful day in the Shire, there's a sense of age, of slow decay, what the elves called the long defeat. Here that feeling is gone. The air is vibrant, humming with a kind of life that is ageless and self-renewing. It would have felt like taking the first true breath of his life. And then, the light. Not the simple, direct light of our sun, but a softer, more pervasive luminescence that seems to emanate from the land itself. This is the lingering light of the two trees, Telperion and Laurelin, which the sun and moon are but pale echoes of. It's a light that doesn't cast harsh shadows. It illuminates everything with a gentle, pearlescent glow. He would have seen the shores of Tol Eressëa, the lonely isle, the outpost where mortals were permitted. White beaches, not of sand, but of what looked like crushed pearls. The greenest hills he had ever seen, dotted with small, elegant silver and white towers. The sound would be the next thing, the eternal murmur of the sea, yes, but beneath it, a faint, impossibly distant music. The music of the Ainur, the song of creation, still echoing in the very fabric of the land. Gandalf would be there, no longer stooped or weary, but radiating a quiet power. Bilbo, ancient and frail, would seem to breathe easier, the years falling away from his spirit, if not his body. For a moment, it must have been paradise, the absolute negation of Mordor. Mordor was ash, rock, and fire. This was light, water, and song. Mordor was a land of death and shrieking despair. This was a land of endless life and quiet joy. It was the fulfillment of the promise, the ultimate sanctuary. And for that first hour, maybe that first day, Frodo might have believed he was finally, truly, safe. The quest was over. The burden was gone. He was home, in a home he had never known. But the body remembers what the mind wants to forget. The first night in paradise would have been the hardest. In the perfect, unbroken tranquility of an elven dwelling on Tol Eressëa, surrounded by a silence so profound it was a presence in itself, the old ghosts would have returned. It would start with the cold, a phantom chill spreading from his left shoulder, where the Morgul king's blade had pierced him on Weathertop. In the Shire, he could blame it on the autumn air, a damp evening. Here, in a land without decay or dampness, there was no external cause. It was a cold from within, a sliver of shadow he had carried across the sea, embedded in his very flesh. No amount of Valinorian light could warm that specific frost. It was a memory held in nerve and bone. Then would come the other aches, the sharp, stinging memory of Shelob's venom in his neck, a sudden tightness in his throat, a phantom paralysis. And perhaps worst of all, the ghost of a weight against his chest. For more than a year, the ring had been his constant companion, its chain a groove against his skin, its presence a pressure on his soul. Now, in its absence, the void it left was a physical sensation. He might find himself clutching at his neck, his fingers searching for the cold, familiar metal, only to find nothing. This wasn't just psychological. Tolkien understood that profound trauma rewrites you, physically. The body keeps the score. In a land where everything was perfect, his own imperfections, his scars, his wounds, his mortal frailty, would feel more pronounced than ever. He was a broken thing in an unbroken land. The elves he would meet, the likes of Glorfindel perhaps, were beings of immense power and age, but they had never known this kind of violation. They fought shadows, yes, but the ring's evil was a uniquely corrosive force. It didn't just kill, it hollowed you out. How could he explain to a being who had seen the light of the trees why he flinched when a shadow fell a certain way, or why he woke up gasping, not from a nightmare of dragons or bolrogs, but from a dream of a simple, golden ring? The physical pains were anchors to the past, constant reminders that while he had left Middle-earth had not entirely left him. The peace of Valinor wasn't a cure, it was a spotlight, illuminating the damage that had been done. And if the body's memory was a torment, the mind's was a far more subtle and dangerous trap. The ring's greatest weapon wasn't fear or despair, but obsession. It worked on the will, twisting love into possessiveness, loyalty into suspicion, and desire into all-consuming greed. For months, Frodo's mind had been a battleground. He had fought not just orcs and Nazgul, but his own thoughts. He had looked at his dearest friend, Samwise Gamgee, and felt a surge of murderous paranoia. He had stood at the cracks of doom and claimed the ring for himself, his will finally and utterly broken. That doesn't just go away. In the utter peace of Tol Eressëa, with no external threats, no quest, no danger, the mind would have turned on itself. Intrusive thoughts, echoes of the ring's poison, would surface in the quiet moments. A flash of resentment at Gandalf for sending him on the quest, a flicker of suspicion towards the elves, wondering what they truly wanted, a sudden horrifying urge to find something precious, something to keep for himself, to hide away in the dark. These thoughts would be alien in a land of such purity. In the Shire, he could dismiss a dark mood as a bad day. Here, such a thought would feel like a sacrilege, a stain of Mordor he had smuggled into paradise. He was fundamentally out of tune with the song being sung all around him. He was a discordant note in a perfect chord. This is where the true danger of Valinor for a mortal comes into play. The sheer, unrelenting, undying perfection of the place would act as a constant, crushing weight on his mortal spirit. It's a land for immortals, whose minds and bodies are built to withstand eternity. A mortal spirit, Tolkien suggests, would be overwhelmed. It would fade. This isn't a physical death, but a spiritual one. The personality, the memories, the very essence of who you are, slowly worn away by the sheer intensity of the undying light, until you become a ghost, a wraith haunting a world you were never meant to inhabit. This was the ultimate risk, that Frodo's reward was not to be healed, but to be erased. To have the very self he fought so hard to save be gently, beautifully, and irrevocably consumed by the paradise meant to be his salvation. The evidence for this more complex, tragic view of Frodo's fate isn't buried in obscure appendices. It's right there, in Tolkien's own letters, where he wrestled with the implications of his own creation. In letter 246, he is devastatingly direct. He states that the Valar, the angelic guardians of this land, would have admitted Frodo not for Frodo's own sake, but because they were filled with pity and admiration. He was, in Tolkien's own words, an object of pity. This is not the language of a triumphant hero entering his reward. It's the language of hospice care. He goes on to say that the journey was meant to be a purgatory, a place of healing for the wounds that could not be healed in Middle-earth. But the most critical passage comes from letter 154, where he explains the fundamental law of Valinor. For mortals, he writes, they would die, and die the sooner, as if moth in a flame too bright. This is the key. The Undying Lands don't make you live forever. They make you live your remaining life at an accelerated, intensified rate. Let's construct a scene from this, a speculative moment grounded in Tolkien's own words. Imagine Frodo, years after his arrival. He's walking with Gandalf along the pearly shores of Erisea. The light is beautiful, the sea is calm, but Frodo feels thin, stretched. He feels his memories of the Shire, once so sharp and vivid, beginning to soften, to lose their edges. He tries to recall the exact shade of Mrs. Cotton's prize-winning pumpkins, or the specific taste of a pint from the Green Dragon, and the details are becoming hazy, like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. He turns to Gandalf and asks, "Am I forgetting?" And Gandalf, with that deep, sad wisdom in his eyes, doesn't lie. He explains that this land is a balm, but it is also a solvent. It soothes the pain by dissolving the vessel that contains it. Frodo's spirit, his hobbit soul, was made for the soil of the Shire, for the cycle of seasons, for a short, merry life. Here, in the timeless, seasonless perfection of Aman, it's unraveling. The purpose of his being here wasn't to start a new life. It was to allow his old one to end in peace. The uncomfortable question this raises is profound. Did Gandalf and Galadriel save Frodo? Or did they simply provide him with a more beautiful and merciful way to die? They sent him not to a retirement home, but to the world's most perfect palliative care unit. For years, Frodo would have walked this beautiful, lonely path. He had Bilbo, ancient and lost in his own memories, and Gandalf, a being of a completely different order. But he was missing the one thing that had grounded him through the entire ordeal: the Shire, or rather, a living, breathing piece of it. And then, one day, another ship would arrive, and on it, a figure Frodo hadn't dared to hope he would ever see again. Samwise Gamgee. After his beloved Rosie passed away, Sam, as a former ring-bearer himself, was also granted passage. His arrival changes everything about the nature of Frodo's healing. Sam isn't just a friend, he's an anchor. He is the living memory of everything Frodo fought to save. Sam doesn't bring tales of elven kings or ancient wars. He brings news of the Shire. He talks about his children, about the state of the garden at Bag End, about the new mayor, about the simple, earthy, hobbit concerns that were once Frodo's entire world. For Frodo, whose own memories were fading, Sam is a transfusion of identity. He can listen to Sam talk about Pippin and Merry's children and feel a connection to the future of the world he saved. He can hear about the planting of the new party tree and remember the joy of the old one. Sam brings the mundane, and in a land of eternal majesty, The mundane is the most precious gift imaginable. He doesn't just talk, he listens. He is the only person in all of existence who can truly understand Frodo's scars. Gandalf understands the cosmic stakes. The elves understand the ancient evil, but only Sam understands the feeling of the wet grass in the Shire and the feeling of the ash of Mordor. He was there for the long, desperate crawl across the plains of Gorgoroth. He was there for the moment of betrayal at the cracks of doom. He can sit with Frodo in the perfect light of Valinor, and they can talk about the darkness. Sam gives Frodo permission to be broken. He doesn't need Frodo to be the legendary hero. He just needs him to be his master, his friend. This human connection, this shared history, becomes the real medicine. It doesn't erase the trauma, but it reframes it. The suffering wasn't just a meaningless horror. It was the price they paid for Sam's garden, for his children, for the Shire's peace. Sam's presence transforms Valinor from a beautiful museum into a place of active, living memory. This brings us to the heart of it, to the philosophical weight of Frodo's journey. Healing, especially from trauma of this magnitude, is not about returning to a previous state. You can't unring the bell. You can't unsee what you've seen or unfeel what you've felt. The Frodo who left the Shire could never come back, not really. That person was gone forever, lost somewhere on the road to Mordor. The quest for healing, then, is not about erasure. It's about integration. It's about finding a way to live with the scars, to incorporate the darkness into a new, more complex identity. And this is the true gift of Valinor. It wasn't a magic wand to wave away the pain. It was the one thing Middle-earth could never offer him: time and silence. In the Shire, he was the hero of the hour. He was Mr. Frodo, the great adventurer. He was expected to be fine, to attend parties, to get back to his old life. But his old life no longer fit. The quiet lanes of Hobbiton felt alien. The cheerful chatter of hobbits felt trivial compared to the silent screams he still heard in his dreams. He was a combat veteran trying to adjust to peacetime and finding it impossible. Valinor offered him an escape not from his pain, but from the expectation that he should be painless. In the Undying Lands, there was no pressure to be normal. There was no harvest to bring in, no social calendar to keep. There was only the endless, gentle light and the soft murmur of the sea. It was a space where he could finally stop performing, stop pretending to be the hobbit he used to be, and simply be the person the quest had made him. The pain was real. The fear was real. The loss was real. Valinor could not unmake history, but it could provide a sanctuary where the echoes of that history could finally fade, not through magic, but through the slow, patient process of acceptance. His reward wasn't happiness. It was peace, a much rarer and more difficult prize. It was the space to finally grieve, not just for what he had endured, but for the person he had lost along the way, himself. And so we arrive at the core insight, the revelation that reframes that entire final chapter. Frodo Baggins did not go to the Undying Lands to live. He went there to die. Not in a tragic, sorrowful way, but in a calm, deliberate, and deeply merciful one. His journey into the West was not the first chapter of a new, immortal life. It was the epilogue to his mortal one. It was the long, slow, gentle exhale after a life of holding his breath in terror. This is the pivot, the moment we move from the specific story of a single hobbit to a universal human truth. What do we do with the wounds that are too deep to heal? What happens to the soldier who can never forget the battlefield? The survivor who can never erase the memory of their ordeal? The person who has looked into an abyss so profound that it has permanently changed the way they see the world? Our stories, our culture, demand a happy ending. We want the hero to come home, marry their sweetheart, and live a long, untroubled life. We want to believe that courage and goodness are rewarded with simple, uncomplicated joy. But Tolkien, a man who survived the trenches of the Somme, knew better. He knew that some burdens, once shouldered, are never truly set down. He knew that the cost of saving the world is sometimes the world itself. Frodo's real reward was the acknowledgement of this truth. The grace he was given was not a magical cure, but a recognition of his sacrifice. The powers of the world looked upon his brokenness and did not try to clumsily fix it. Instead, they gave him a place where he could be broken in peace. They gave him a space to finally let go. We all search for our own Valinor, a place, a person, a practice, a quiet moment, where we don't have to pretend, a place where our scars are not seen as flaws, but as testaments to the battles we have fought, a place where we have permission to be tired, to be sad, to be incomplete. Frodo's journey tells us that such a place is not a fantasy. The search for it is one of the most fundamental parts of the human experience. This reframing of Frodo's fate resonates so deeply because it mirrors a reality we all understand on some level. We live in a world that is uncomfortable with lingering sorrow. We are told to move on, to get over it, to look on the bright side. But some experiences leave a permanent mark. They become part of the landscape of our souls. Frodo's story, seen through this lens, becomes an incredibly powerful validation for anyone who has ever felt out of sync with a world that seemed to be demanding a cheerfulness they could no longer access. Think of the veteran returning from war, who finds the noise of a 4th of July celebration unbearable. Think of the doctor who works a brutal shift in an emergency room and then has to go to a child's birthday party. Think of anyone who has grieved a profound loss and feels a sense of alien-like detachment while watching others go about their daily lives. This is Frodo in the Shire after the quest. He saved the party, but he can no longer enjoy it. The music is playing, but he hears a different, darker tune. His journey to Valinor is the ultimate act of self-compassion. It is the acceptance that he can't go back to the way things were. The melancholy beauty of his ending lies in its honesty. It doesn't offer a false promise of a perfect fix. Instead, it offers a different kind of hope. The hope of peace, of acceptance, of a quiet place where the weight of the past can finally be set down. Not because it has vanished, but because the strength to carry it has run out. And that is okay. The earned emotion here is not the triumph of a hero, but a deep, empathetic relief. We feel relief not because he found happiness, but because he was finally given permission to stop searching for it. The greatest gift the elves gave him was not a ticket to paradise, but the understanding that his pain was real, and the dignity of a final resting place worthy of the sacrifice he made. So we circle back to that image at the Grey Havens, the ship with its white sail waiting to depart. When we first read it, we see a scene of sad but triumphant departure, a hero sailing off to his reward. But now, with this understanding, we see it differently. We see a hobbit, old before his time, his eyes filled with a weariness that no amount of sleep can cure. We see a man who has saved the world, and in doing so, has become a stranger in it. His departure is not a victory lap. It is a surrender, a necessary and courageous surrender to the reality of his own wounds. He is not leaving his friends behind so much as he is finally going to a place where he can wait for them in peace. The story of Frodo Baggins is not a tragedy, but it is also not the simple fairy tale we sometimes want it to be. It is something far more profound and far more true to life. It's a story about the devastating cost of doing the right thing. It's an admission that some wounds are carried for a lifetime. But it is also a story that insists that even after the most profound trauma, a measure of peace is possible. It may not be the peace of innocence regained, but the peace of experience accepted. The quiet grace of the end of a long, hard road. And so the question we are left with is not what happened to Frodo in the Undying Lands. The question is what we do with the burdens we carry in our own mortal lands. Where do we find our grey havens? Where is the quiet shore where we can finally, honestly, and without judgment, lay our own burdens down? Let me know what you think. What does Frodo's final chapter mean to you? The conversation is, I think, the most important part. Thank you for listening.